All right, it's that kind of day. It's a three-prosecutor day here on the Ross Kaminsky Show. That has never happened before. You know, it's funny. I figured that our guest earlier in the show, Andy McCarthy, would probably know our next guest, and she'd probably know him, Anna-Sigga Nicolazzi, who ran the Homicide Bureau. She was chief of trials for the Homicide Bureau for the Brooklyn DA's office. And I know Andy was a federal prosecutor, but he was in New York, too. I actually just got a text from George Brockler, who joined us on the show, former local DA, and he said, "My son and I sat with your next guest at a national DA conference in Quebec. Nice lady." So apparently everybody knows you, Anna. So welcome to the show.
The words all come here. You had the trifecta today of prosecutors.
Yeah. And I imagine you know both of those guys. And
I do. And George in particular, I remember him and his son quite well. That was just, I guess, going on a year and a half ago now that I last saw him.
Well, welcome to the show. And before we talk about your really interesting project for investigation discovery called True Conviction, I just need to get your take on the Chauvin trial. Not the whole thing. Your best guess, if you were a betting woman, as to what this jury will do and why you think that.
Well, I'm never going to give you my best guess, especially at this juncture, and here's why. Because, yes, of course I have my opinion, like most people have, but especially right now, we are in such a critical stage. I want everyone to take a step back and let this jury do their job. What I mean by that is they were the ones that sat there and listened to all the evidence and heard the judge's instruction, and we all know the pressure and the attention on this case coming from all different ways, and I just want us to step back. Let's see what they do, and then I am more than happy to talk about it. But for me, I think this is a time right now we need to all really just let it breathe and hope that they come back with the right verdict, which means the evidence and the law. And I think they will. I hope they will.
All right. And despite your saying all that, I'm going to ask you a follow-up question about it anyway.
Of course you are.
Of course I am. George in particular thinks that it would be difficult or impossible for anybody to be on that jury, even if they had moved the trial somewhere else, who wouldn't be aware of the societal attention to this and the significance of it. And he thinks that it could push the jury towards convicting on one of the murder charges rather than the manslaughter charge. Andy thinks, and I think, that the manslaughter conviction is more likely. So I'm not going to repeat my question that you refused to answer about what conviction you think is more likely. My question for you is, do you think the jury feels, or juries feel, this kind of pressure?
I mean, how could you not in a case like this? And George is obviously a very smart man and a great prosecutor. And, you know, but to hear that these men and women, of course they know about it. It'd be silly to think that almost anyone, unless you're living under an actual rock, doesn't know about this case. However, they were chosen because each one of those men and women, those people, said that they could put that aside. Because you can hear about a case. I had many cases that, you know, while they had notoriety or publicity, that they were able to say, okay, I heard about that, I read about it, I have some personal feelings, but I could put that aside because what I think may not be the evidence I'm actually going to get, or I may not really understand what the law is. And so I'm going to trust in those men and women that they can do that because that is what they have taken an oath to do.
Last question on this, and then we're going to talk about true conviction. There was some noise made by the judge yesterday, and I talked about it with my previous guests a little bit, as to whether commentary by Maxine Waters or other politicians or, you know, other people outside the courtroom could be a strong basis for appeal. And I think between my two previous guests, I think there was a little difference of opinion. One thought that appealing on the basis of statements made elsewhere is a very heavy lift, and the other thought, you know what, it really could be a factor. What's your take, and what's your experience, actually, in trials that got public attention? Did you find that commentary outside the courtroom was ever a successful grounds for appeal?
The short answer to the last part of your question is no. I never had a successful attack for appeal. I think that, remember, the judge took a pretty significant step by making comments about it and basically telling everyone, like, stand down, if you will. Let's let this jury do their job. And the jury, they are not supposed to listen to any accounts, watch any accounts, so they hopefully have not heard any of what's swirling out there, because you don't want to impact their decision making. So I'm going to trust that they haven't. But if they have, and I have had cases that were a lot of publicity, that jurors were inadvertently usually exposed on, looking it down and seeing a newspaper with a headline that had some salacious detail or something, and then the judge brings them in, and usually right away, to say, listen, they inform the court themselves usually and say, hey, I was exposed to this. And then the judge says, can you keep it out of your mind? Can you still push that aside and just focus on what you saw and heard in this courtroom? And that is usually what takes place. So I'm going to trust that they haven't been exposed, and if so, that they can still not let it impact their decision. And I'm going to turn one thing to you before we talk about true convictions, that just dialing that 303 area code today brings me back, because I went to University of Colorado. Boulder, and I'm a huge Colorado fan. It was years that I remember fondly, as much for Colorado as for my college days. So it's nice to talk to someone in your neck of the woods.
Wonderful. That's absolutely great. So you were a prosecutor in the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office. You tried over 50 felonies. You tried 35 murders. And now you're bringing this experience to the investigation discovery series True Conviction. Season 3 premiered a week ago today. All of the episodes for the third season are available now on Discovery Plus. But tell us what's special about True Conviction and what your focus is, because it feels to me like you do have, like you're really thinking a lot about the victims and not just a salacious TV show talking about bad guys.
And it was always important to me to stay true to myself and that which I value, which is my life as a prosecutor. That is still the hat that I wear, even though I'm a former prosecutor at this point. I care about our system. I care about these victims and the survivors and the aftermath. And the space that I really saw that was lacking, there's no shortage of true crime television shows, but none from the prosecutor's perspective, or that I thought really focused on who these people, these victims were in life, and that let you speak to the men and women, or I should say hear from the men and women and people involved in the cases, to actually tell you what they did or didn't do or why they made certain decisions. Because I think that's something that's lacking. You hear about it from people that read about it or have studied this. Well, let's hear about it from the people themselves, especially for me, who I want people to have faith in our system. I think it's hearing from the people that are actually involved.
So having been in the system for as many years as you were and prosecuting all the cases that you prosecuted, from 1 to 10, how much faith do you have in our criminal justice system to... And I guess overall, combining everything into one grade, like justice is blind and, usually guilty people get convicted and innocent people don't, and all that kind of thing. Overall, how much faith do you have?
On a scale of 1 to 10, I would say a 9.8. And what I mean by that is I believe our system works. I believe it is better than any other system in any other country that we have. I think there are things we can do better. I think that there are things that have been done that should not have been done by various individuals, or we realize the error of our ways over time. But people want to get it right. People do this work because they care about it. As a country, we want people to take up the mantle of holding people accountable for crimes. And, we can talk all day about what punishment should be and sentencing, and I'm all for always making it better, making us better. But I think it works, and I think our jury system, I don't care where they're from, men and women that sit on those juries, they want to get it right. And sometimes I think it fails. Sometimes I think that people do things that are wrong and inexcusable, but that's where I give it the point, too, for that, because very little in life is perfect, if anything. But I think that overall it's a great system that I just hope we keep getting better with time.
In the minute that we have left, I want to give folks a sense of what your television show, True Conviction, is like, what it's about. And folks, again, True Conviction is on Investigation Discovery, and you can stream the entire third season on Discovery Plus. One of the episodes is one called Family Under Fire, and I don't know if you remember each episode by the title, but...
I do.
Okay, so, tell us just a little bit about, because that one, I mean, they're all really gripping summaries of each episode, but tell us a little about that and how you approach it in True Conviction.
That's a case that took place in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, if I remember correctly. It is literally something that's only supposed to be a fiction, but not real. But it is real. A family is literally fled out of their home in the middle of the night when there were homemade bombs thrown into their house. There were masked gunmen. A mother and her teenage daughter were executed. And, you know, spoiler alert here, but I still think there's plenty of reason to watch because you won't believe some of what you hear and see. One of the other family members was charged with that murder, so here he is trying to grieve for his parents' death, but now he's also his mother's death and sister's, and he is being charged with that murder. Ultimately, he was acquitted. Suspicion was always on him for decades, and then one day, an investigator picks up that case, and they found out that it was somebody else. And while I am happy to say that I think those things happen few and far between, although even one is too many, and we know that there's quite a few out there, and then they get it right. And this family reunited, being the siblings that were left behind, and it was an unbelievable story of why this murder even happened, or then to speak to the accused son all these years later. And it really just had so many moving parts, but to see these siblings reunite and to have them go back and talk about their memories of the mother and the sister, it's one of those things that will always stay with me.
Wow. So you personally talked to the son who was accused of being involved with the crime and that he was acquitted of it?
Yes. You know, I have this rule overall in my world, which is no notoriety. I don't want to give attention to the people that commit these crimes. They've brought enough attention on themselves by what they've done. I want to focus on the victims. But here, ultimately, this guy was a victim in all of this, which puts him in a very different camp to me. And so he was gracious enough to speak with me and vice versa. And as a prosecutor, how invaluable a lesson to me. Again, it's always a reminder. We have to keep our eyes open. We cannot put blinders on. And it was pretty incredible, this guy, to even hear the faith that he still has in our system, even though he was wronged all those years ago.
Remarkable. Folks, I want you to check out Anna-Sigga Nicolazzi's show, True Conviction. It airs on Investigation Discovery, and all of the episodes for the third season are available to stream on Discovery+. Anna, thanks so much for spending time with us. I really appreciate it. And if you would do me a favor and stick on hold for just 15 seconds so I can talk with you off the air, I'd appreciate it.
You got it. Thank
All right.
you.
Thanks so much. Folks, go check out this series. It's going to be really, really fascinating when you have someone with that amount of experience bringing this to television. We'll be right back on The Ross Kaminsky Show.
6:30 KHOW has your chance to win $1,000. Listen at 5 past the hour for the $12K a day giveaway. Listen for the keyword and enter it on our website, KHOW.com, for your chance to win $1,000. Sponsored by Juries.
The spring sale is going on now at Juries, and you can save $7 per gallon on Benjamin Moore Regal Select Paint. Stop by any of their 22 Front Range locations and save today. For locations and hours, visit GUIRY